the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AVWeek, episode 120, recorded Friday, December 6th, 2013. Sonic Screwdriver.
Ready.
AVWeek.
Performing. Scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AVWeek. It's time for AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. Good afternoon, good evening, good night. My name is Tim Albright, and I'm your host. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. With us this week is the Chief Muckety-Muck and everything fabulous at Control Concepts. His name is Steve Greenblatt. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And also with us is George Tucker. As his day's job, he is the engineering coordinator for World Stage. But he is everything that's good about AVNation and nothing that's bad. How are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine, thanks.
Yeah, I don't pay you, so, I got to give you something.
It's a labor of love.
It's a labor of love. Sometimes, sometimes not. So, this week we're going to talk about Barco and moving into some other different areas for them. Whole house wiring. I figured, it's getting that time of year where those of us in the AV industry, we don't twiddle our thumbs during the wintertime, so we've got to find something to do. There's a couple of really good articles from the folks at Pub. And also, the NSCA has their annual conference, and we're going to talk about that. But first up, Barco is going after a quote-unquote smaller audience. According to the AV Network, they're expanding what the wonderful industry has called the huddle room category, and I have my own issues with that term, mainly because, you know what, I'm a football fan, and a huddle is something you get into before you hike the ball, not a freaking room. But that's beside the point. They are getting into the smaller rooms, the smaller areas with their ClickShare. And I actually read a tweet this week that said that that Barco is going to start incorporating ClickShare into some of their projectors. Did you guys see that? Nobody saw that. All right.
No, I didn't catch it.
Maybe I just dreamt it. It was, sleep deprivation, but I did see it as well. So, Steve, here's the first question to you. How big of a deal is this that Barco is getting into these smaller spaces with what honestly has been a pretty successful product line for them?
Well, I think that what we found over the course of time now is that the smaller spaces are becoming more commoditized, and I guess the out-of-the-box solutions are probably the best fit there. So they probably look at their product now as being pretty much providing the infrastructure for these types of rooms, and maybe they by getting in there, and it allows them to then set the standard for bigger rooms, and I guess be the go-to company.
Well, and this whole sharing thing, if you don't know what ClickShare is, it's a little circular device, and you plug it in the USB, and when you're ready to present, you click the button and you click share. But integrating this into these smaller rooms, they've had success already in the past with conference rooms and stuff like this, and hooking this into larger projectors. I guess my biggest issue, not biggest issue, but my biggest question is the huddle space really that, not lucrative is probably the wrong word, but I'll use it nonetheless. Is it a lucrative enough space for them to be going after?
There's probably a lot more of them than your bigger outfitted conference rooms. So it sounds to me like it probably is a lower cost for companies to put in a lot more of these rooms where you have an input and a display, and very easy to use, no wiring, lower cost of installation. So and it's probably just a box sale at that point. So I would say, yeah, I think that it is, and then being that huddle has become this big catchphrase, so I guess why not get on board?
Oh, don't say box sale to an integrator. They hate me in St. Louis. George, we'll start off first of all. Barco getting into the smaller space. Is that a good idea or not?
Well, I think it is because we discussed something about this in a couple of episodes ago, or maybe I discussed it with somebody else. I can't remember. But Barco is going to be in a position where they're selling displays or projection equipment, and others are connecting to it, and they're getting that add-on sale, however simple it is, aside from them. So why shouldn't they get part of the profit when they have the technology to do it? I think some other companies, I think Christie has something like this that they do, which is maybe that's what we were talking about. Actually, that's probably what we were talking about. Why lose those sales when it's really a low impact to the people putting it in, and you're still going to get the money from it? And that's basically my argument. Do it.
Okay.
I wonder too if it provides them the hook into these rooms too.
Sure.
Maybe there is some way that they can then use it for some sort of monitoring or build upon having a small bit of technology that's the basis for that room.
Kind of like a carrot to get you to get them in the door, and then hey, by the way, we got all this other stuff, that you can purchase.
It's almost kind of like Crestron's Room View Inside, or whatever that's called. The integrated
the Crestron Inside. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. I shouldn't poke fun, but it's funny.
And again, this is that time of year. Everybody's crossing over. Everybody's sort of bumping into everybody else's marketplace, and you get to a threshold where you have to do that.
You don't have to do that. You don't have to,
but there becomes a certain threshold where it makes money.
Okay.
Where it's important to do that, and the crossover potential, as we just mentioned, is a potential of greatness that you must do it. Sound like a professor saying that, but
you sound very professorish. Yes, saying that.
Professorish.
The reason I said you don't.
This.
The reason I say you don't have to do that is this, and I've said this before, and I've actually written about this. There are some companies that I absolutely love their core business. Right, I absolutely love what they do, and then they start diverting. They start going down different roads that, granted, don't make sense to me, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I never will ever claim to be. I make fun of Crestron and the shades because I still don't get the shades, and both of you have told me why, and Matt Scott has told me why, and I've had folks at Crestron tell me why. And yes, from a business model, I get it. But what's so wrong about focusing on your core business and what you do really, really, really freaking well, and let somebody else make the stupid shades or whatever it is. So, George, the other question was huddle rooms in general. Is this a viable space, or is this just this year's catchphrase?
I think that all depends on what next year brings us financially.
Yeah.
If the markets do better and we want more dedicated space, I don't think it'll become the du jour thing to do, the hip thing to do. Although, look at the spaces, especially in metropolitan areas, where startups are sharing corporate space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's lots of these popping up. It pops up in many of the cities where the downtown has deteriorated and no one's really renting long term. These are the spaces they're going to use those for. That's where this really will probably take off and work really well. And everybody wants to be viewed as a startup, so if the startups are coming to you and you have similar spaces, yes, I could see that sort of rolling along and becoming the standard simply because everyone wants it.
Kind of like the little the incubators.
Yeah. I mean, you look around New York, Seattle, Portland, even on the other urban cities in the Midwest, there are incubator buildings that maybe used to be financial and fully, rented out to financial firms that are no longer there. You need to do something with the space. That's what they're doing with them. Temporary offices, shared spacing. Even the offices say, why do you need an office? Just come to us with a professional receptionist and a set-aside space for your company. Yeah. Look and sound professional.
All right.
Isn't it also becoming popular in the education space where they have these little smaller areas where students can gather around and collaborate? I've seen it in a few that we've encountered. Well,
I've seen it in more than a few, and I we're a community college, so I have a different use case for things. The place that I work on a full-time basis, we're a community college, and so it's a commuter school, and so you don't have a whole lot of that. But I have friends at UCLA, and my buddy Matt Silverman worked for George Mason and some others, where they're saying the exact same thing. Yes, absolutely. You've got collaboration. You've got these classes and this coursework where you have to have students collaborating, sitting around a common table, and the ability for each student to take their work and put it up on a big screen and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about, this is what I'm working on, this is my theorem here, instead of having everybody crowding around one person's laptop, whether that's a 13-inch or a 17-inch, being able to put that up on a big screen, yes, is very, very beneficial. And I can definitely see use cases for that in larger educational institutions. We just don't happen to be, our coursework doesn't typically lend itself to that use. So, all right, folks, this is the part of the show where we scare the bejesus out of you. From Engadget, scientists create malware that communicates using sound, no network required. Now, I don't remember which episode this was, and George, maybe you do. You used the term air gap with me, and it was very funny to me because, what was the biggest problem? I think it was a video connection, and it was an air gap. The actual
high impedance air gap.
Yeah, high impedance air gap. The plug was actually disconnected.
Yes.
And something that I've written about and just openly questioned both AMX and Crestron and some other folks is the security of control systems. Is the security of getting a piece of virus or some sort of malware in there, and that can compromise your system, especially as we're putting more and more smart buildings in, and these systems are controlling more and more of our lives. This is going to be a concern. At least I personally think it's going to be a concern. They all say, no, don't worry about it. We're small enough. Nobody's going to bother making a piece of spyware or virus for us. Mm-hmm. How big of a deal is this for us in the industry? The fact that there are potentially these computer viruses that can jump over air without being connected to an actual system. How vulnerable, I guess, are our systems as we get more and more on the network?
Well, how vulnerable? Well, first of all, this one, talking about sound waves, the network has nothing to do with it. If you read some of the article, there's an original article that they referenced from Ars Technica, I think it was, about how the guy discovered that when he disconnected the speakers, even though he had Bluetooth and Ethernet, all the cards removed from the new computer, it was still doing this little IP ping and getting some bits of information out. So he's presuming it's high-frequency stuff. I don't know yet. It still sounds very mysterious to me, and parts of the article are written in a way that make me think of the guy that attached the electrodes to his eyes and blinked to do the 3D without glasses. Mm-hmm. I don't ask me why, but I'm getting that feeling. I don't know why yet. But if it's true, it's not that difficult to do. But like they say, the data rate is terrible. But if they can improve that data rate of transmission, it was infecting embedded systems, he said. So it was overwhelming the BIOS and then being able to rewrite parts of the BIOS for its own use. Mm-hmm. That's scary. All this embedded stuff that we thought was secure, aside from somebody hacking into the manufacturer's feed firmware and inserting a rogue operating system, this is pretty scary stuff. And it makes me feel the people out there better get a drink. I'm going to make a movie reference, like we're the creature watching Jeff Goldblum and Will Smith in the little spacecraft.
Oh, geez, nice.
That's what it makes me feel like. Okay, wait a minute, we've reached that moment. Maybe not quite, but we're almost there. And the reason I'm asking is because at a chip level that you mentioned, rewriting the BIOS, you could then at the chip level rewrite whatever you wanted, and that's the part I guess that kind of concerns me. Again, not that a Crestron system running my banquet facility is that big of a deal, but AMX, It could be an incidental casualty.
Well, and I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the AMX system of the Crestron, whatever automation system running the DoD. There's an AMX system down in the war room at the White House, for crying out loud. And they use fiber to make sure everything's secure and this, that, and the other. Well, you know what? If you can travel over sound waves, nobody has to bring in a USB stick to infect the White House. They could just play a sound.
Yeah, well, though, then I guess you get like the military complexes, which don't have RF, they have IR. You're suddenly going to have no speakers. And I guess you'll be back to, warning will be a piezoelectric device on the outside.
Oh, jeez. All right, Steve, you work and live and breathe in the world of automation. Not that George and I don't, but you do it more than we do.
Sure.
How big of a deal is this? Am I screaming that the sky is falling here, or is this a legitimate concern?
I guess I'd be interested to see what its first impact is and what it first does go after. Everybody has brought up those same concerns that you've said over time. How do we protect ourselves with our control systems? What if, and especially those that are more based around a PC rather than a proprietary controller. I am one to be optimistic and say that I'm not fearing it. However, being that it is on the network and being that we've probably had a lot more vulnerability and haven't had a problem yet. So I don't know that this is going to be the one thing that does penetrate.
All right. I sometimes I feel like I am Chicken Little. So and you know what? Here's the thing. I got no problem being Chicken Little because sometimes he's right. So, all right. From the world of streaming, NVIDIA's Shield now streams. PC games to your 1080p. Are you freaking kidding me? You know what? It's Friday and I was on the Pacific time zone for all week this week, so leave me alone. If those of you who don't know, I'm in St. Louis, so I was 2 hours behind my life for the week. Here's the thing, guys. This is not only does this have impact for gaming, because obviously you've got the ability to do something they've been talking about for a while, which is remote gaming, where you've got you never really purchase a hard physical copy of the game. It lives somewhere on a server somewhere, and the ability to push 1080p to the device. But we're also getting to the point where we're streaming 1080p video. Steve, when it comes to installing, integrating, and designing systems now, how close are we to the point? Are we to the point yet? And if we're not, how soon before we stop worrying about physical devices like Blu-ray players and start beefing up the network devices that play our videos?
I think we're just about there. Physical media, I think, is just about becoming a thing of the past. In my opinion, I see far less dedicated devices like that, and far more just laptop inputs and network connections and not even a PC a lot of times in systems. It's all about the network, and it's all about that's really the future of AV, and as we know, but also the future of audio and video transport.
How does that impact the design, though? I mean, how is that going to impact? Not just you mentioned making sure that there's at least a laptop, and you're right, probably not a dedicated PC like a lot of us have seen over the last few years, but at least some sort of connection, whether that's HDMI or DisplayPort or even Thunderbolt, God forbid. But how does it impact, I guess, what goes in the rack? Where does that take us to what we stack in the rack?
Well, as it stands right now, we still have our dedicated switcher, so that to be able to switch your HD signals, so that's where we are currently. But yet there are devices out there. There are switchers that are more modular and rely on the network to do switching. From what I understand, I think that there's a company, SVSI, I think it is, that is more of a network-driven switcher, rather, which is a little bit different than your standard DM or AMX and Innova and so forth.
Okay. George, same question to you. How close are we, and what does that do to what we put in our racks?
Well, it's going to be a Pico world, isn't it? I mean, the component systems, I think, are slowly going away, whether that's control or it's our files for playback, our system that reproduces it. It's more and more we're getting to that form factors, whether it's driven by the technology's getting smaller, so we have to go that way just because we want things smaller and sexier, or because for some of us, the living spaces are getting smaller. Think of that way. In urban areas, the living area of an individual is getting smaller, and in certain parts of the countryside, the Midwest, they're getting larger. There's the American Association of Architects put out a study a couple of months ago about this, how it's the urban areas are shrinking and people wanting them to be smaller, and the opposite's happening. So we have this diametrically opposed, easy for me to say, situations going on, but the electronics are going to make us want them smaller, and the physical medium will be pushed out. It's not what we really want. And what I love about this tool is that it's an all-in-one thing, but then you can map the motion control. So I can still not be a gesture. I don't have to wave my hand. I can just use the controller to say, okay, I'm going to do the thumb drive, the thumb joystick, and move around.
Yes,
that was my big attraction to this thing. Is absolutely, that's what I need. I want this right now.
You want a physical controller. All right, let me ask you guys this. And I'm not going to – I spent the week at BIAMP's training facility learning the new Tessera, which was a really great training. I'm going to write a blog post about it for Monday. The thing that struck me was this, and it's a conversation I had on the show floor of InfoComm. I want to say 2009, 2008, somewhere in there. And I was talking with the manufacturer about infrastructure and making sure that we have switchers and this, that, and the other. And they made the comment. They said there's going to come a day when you won't have an actual physical switcher. You're going to have a creation point. Let's say it's a wall box that you plug in an HDMI connector to. And you're going to have a display device. And the two of them are going to talk over some sort of protocol. And let's say it's a network protocol, AVB or HDBaseT or something else that none of us have ever known about yet. And the switcher is really going to be the network. The switcher, the big 48 by 48 switcher that we have in these large, banquet halls, are going to go away, and the network itself is going to become the switcher. Are we there yet to that? And if not, how close are we there, George?
I don't know yet. We still got a lot of infrastructure that will take a while to sort of weed out of the system before that becomes a reality. I don't know, and I got to tell you offhand, I don't know the actual technical physics of it that it could do it. Maybe someday, sure. We said we would never have all the audio, video, and cameras and everything else in a little box about the size. It can actually be smaller than this now. Mm-hmm. So yes, will it happen? Yes, but I don't know how soon. I really have I have a fair amount of mixed optimism and skepticism on that.
Okay, Steve, are we anywhere close to where the network itself has become the switcher?
I'm not sure if the technology can handle it yet, but I think that's the way we're going. I'm pretty confident in that. And I, to your point where you were saying that you just have inputs and outputs within the local room, I guess you could also see that in spaces where they have a centralized, where they have all their equipment centralized, and then they just have all these satellite spaces with one big switcher in the middle that allows you to send anything to anywhere, and that's kind of the same idea as what you're talking about. It's just using our current technology rather than using the network. But I think that the idea is certainly a lucrative one and is the future. And I guess it's just a matter of being able to know that the network can support it and everybody is willing to adopt that approach.
Well, and I have a question on that then. So for integrators, it becomes a simple plug and play. It's a one box somewhere else.
See, and I don't think it does.
Okay, is that where we're leading here, though? Is again, we had the Pico conversation earlier.
Okay, so here's why I say that. All of us have been talking about the fact that AV is turning into IT quickly, right? Mm-hmm. You use AVB as an example. There's not a whole lot of switches yet that will support AVB. Cisco, who's on the board of the Avenue Alliance, still doesn't have a switch that they're selling out there. The most stable one that I've heard of on a commercial pro level is the Extreme switch. So you take that concept, right? That idea that AV is turning into IT is quicker than some of us would like. that's why I don't think that the integrator is necessarily going to be a plug here and a plug here. They're also going to have to support the infrastructure. They're going to have to spec the cabling. We talked about the bandwidth issues. They're going to have to make sure that what they're putting in, as far as the twisted pair or fiber, whichever one, is going to support what the endpoints are going to support. And they're also going to have to be either supplying or speccing the switch that goes in. Because right now the CTO of whatever corporation, doesn't really care that it supports audio and video and whatever else. He just cares about making sure that the data packets get from point A to point B in a quickly and efficient manner, and that his IT managers can manage those switches. And you start putting audio and video on their backbone, and they're going to need educating, first of all, and then they're going to need to care about it. So that's why I don't think that the integrators are just going to be selling the endpoints. They're also going to have to be intimately involved in everything that happens between those endpoints. Well,
riddle me this, and if I'm not cutting you off, Steve.
Yeah.
A lot of devices that we have now have embedded chips inside the cable. Currently, they're the old matchbooks, if anybody remembers those size little covered cables. But there's a lot of technology in those where that could become the technology you plug into the wall outlet, whatever that connection is, as you said earlier with the protocol. And that becomes your managing the switch. It becomes managing the data because that's got the processing power, or soon will. These little tiny embedded microcontrollers could be the future of all that, and that's where it all lives. Now, we could make the argument of it won't pass the bandwidth for audiophile, or it would lose data, and we should be up at 48 kilohertz sample, not 42 or 41, 44.1. But it may be the future because convenience and low overhead is where they want to go. Now, how soon that is, as I said earlier, I don't know, but it's a thought that suddenly occurred to me, is that I could go with that. A case full of cables that have their own technology and smarts in them, and connect them together, and they're in a talking mesh network.
Yep.
If you think about it, there's your control too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're the guys who just have to understand how to make the protocol work until they make plug and play on that grand of a scale work, and that'll keep us in the money for at least a little while. Because it ain't going to work out of the gate.
Going to go back to hanging flat panels, George. No, and you make a good...
Screw gun will travel.
Yeah. No, you make a good point, and the reason we're kind of there already though with the networks, because HDBaseT this past year they've released their switch, sort of, where you can go in and out and their DAs. We're still using though these converter boxes, and I guess if we ever come up with a standard, and don't throw things at me, George, because we don't need another standard, then that would be nice. So I don't know. We'll see. You are listening to AV Week. That gentleman right there, if I can click on his picture properly, is Steve Greenblatt. Also with us is George Tucker. An interesting question from one of our friends, Julie Jacobson. She asked the question in CE Pro: does it pay to be an early adopting reseller of new tech like 4K, UHD? Let's get down to 8K maybe. Steve, we'll start with you on this one. How close to the bleeding edge is profitable, I guess, is another way to ask this.
Well, as somebody who has to be responsible for making it work, I try to stay away from it. But that's my opinion. But I do understand how it could be profitable, because just like any other product, you're always going to have your early adopters, and those people are willing to pay. And if the technology, if the solution fits the problem and the need is there, then it's a matter of then having the right smarts to be able to make it work, or having the right patience, or being able to rely on tech support. But it's of course, I think the common opinion is going to be, hey, you maybe should let it be out for a little while and let everybody else break it before you try putting it in.
Well, that's a good question. Should we let's talk about 4K specifically for a second. When it comes to 4K and let's just, resolutions, because eventually there will be an 8K and eventually there'll be a 16. I'm not psychic here. I'm just not stupid either. This is where they're going with this. Is there a time frame, or should we let the consumer industry kind of chew on these things for a while before we touch them? And if so, how long? Steve?
So I get I think commercial applications lag behind in these types of things, and I think the wow factor is not as critical in commercial as it is in residential. So I think it is going residential is probably going to break in these products and this technology before we have to get involved and we start to see it adopted. If that answers the question.
No, it does. It does. George, same question to you. How quickly should we start rallying the troops and start slinging 4K and 8K when it comes down the pike?
Well, it all depends on your clientele, right? I mean, if you've got the clientele who has to have it first, then it's profitable. If they're the people who willing to wait and who might be just a bit shy of, I don't know, the DVD, HD, and Blu-ray war that left some people with gear and material and physical medium that doesn't work anymore in anything other than the one thing they bought. You have those two, even in the very 1% wealth market, there'll be those who will want it because they have to have it, and those who don't because they want to wait and have something that works, as it were. Riding on the bleeding edge, I think, is less and less of a business opportunity, in my opinion. As Steve said, let it roll out, let it work first, then we make it work as a system and provide them with the best options that are out there, rather than having to go back again and again to a client that won't pay a service contract for upgrading and making it work with modern equipment, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to make money off of cutting edge, as an installer at least, is less and less. Again, you're back to the Barcos. You're back to those guys like with the Huddle Space. This is not cutting edge, but why are we even waiting for it to work in other stuff? We have a solution. You see my point.
Well, it's kind of cutting edge because I'm not going to say that Barco invented the space or invented the technology, but they were one of the first to come out with something that was quick and easy to connect several different display or several different laptops and content devices to one single display. They weren't the first ones by any stretch of the imagination, but the fact that you've got this little button that plugs into their USB and you click it and that does it. I mean, that to me was pretty simple. So I don't know. All right, moving on from our friends over at Electronic House. That was interesting. I love video feedback.
It's artsy.
It is very artsy. It's very
always artsy.
From our friends over at Electronic House. This is where the DIY part of the winter, at least for guys like me, come into play. Whole house wiring, and I'm going to ask you guys a couple different questions. The article specifically by Lisa Montgomery says 7 places not to overlook pre-wiring. But I also want to talk about not just pre-wiring, but after the fact. Once you've moved into your house, or let's say that you didn't build your house, you're like George and I. George's house is like 500 years old, and mine's not quite that old. So George, when it comes to wiring your house, your whole house, or whether it be network infrastructure or some sort of twisted pair audio and video distribution. Where exactly are some of the pitfalls, and what do you have to make sure that you do?
Well, from a personal standpoint, what I have to be ready to do is redo an entire room, if not 2 rooms, once the renovation starts, just to get cable in. I'm not 500 years old, but I have a 1901 Colonial still with slat boards and plaster in some rooms. So, yeah, I have to be ready to take that all down, put in new framing.
Jeez.
Nothing. So it's simple stuff.
Is it worth it then at that point?
Well, this was the inspiration, as it were, for the Brundlefly post that we talk about every so often about wireless video.
Yeah.
Because I really wanted to go wireless, but it's not going to work because it doesn't work for me right now based on the way the house is, and I've had to run wire through the walls and redo some of that framing, but I do it at a very piecemeal state. I had money set aside to make nice media rooms, and it's a hodgepodge. It's not a theater. It's a media room because I will not take down 6 walls to do this. In modern construction, I see it. When my mom and dad were building their house a couple of years ago, 10, 12 years ago, it was all about putting in Ethernet, twisted pair.
Yeah.
It was all about putting in coax because coax was still king. I guess in many ways it still is.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of copper running that house. as a sort of insurance against, and he was smart enough to put in 2 runs of copper per port so that you could always add. So it was 2 of coax, 2 of twisted pair Cat 5 back then. Those kind of things are still essential, I think, even for being able to have conduit to run for extra power. It's a little off the topic, but if you're in conduit, it's easier, even in a house, to run stuff.
Much easier.
Yeah, much easier. Less resistance.
Well, let me ask you this, because George is your 1901 Colonial, is slightly younger than the college I work at, which was built in the 1830s. And we still have buildings that we use from the 1830s, 1840s. And we don't take down entire rooms, but we run, wire mold. Is there something so evil when it comes to rehabbing and running cables? Is there something evil about wire mold that you wouldn't do that?
I think it's an aesthetics thing.
Okay.
I'm not a huge designer saying, oh my God, bumps on the wall, but it's a 19 Colonial with big, heavy coping and I can't think of the word right now. I'm having a brain fart, but all that molding. Thank you. Molding is there, and it doesn't look right with it.
Okay.
In the kids' room, maybe. In the upstairs playroom that we built for them, sure. But I'm not going to put that through my entire living or media space because it detracts. They're nice walls. It's nice molding. I spent a lot of time taking paint off of them and making the wood come out. I don't want that to be detracted by a white mold plastic thing, even if it could look artistic. Okay. I've seen the stuff that goes up top, right? Your crown molding. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to look nice. I'm sorry, I'm the son of a builder. I see it. I see it.
And that's a valid point,
Yeah.
And that's a valid point. All right, Steve, you're doing your whole house, whether it's a rehab or it's a brand new one. What's 2 or 3 things that you have to make sure that you have?
Well, anybody that knows me knows that that this type of stuff isn't my forte, but I do know that it's important to have extra spares. That's an important thing. The what ifs and just in cases, and the Cat 5, of course, is the probably the do everything utility cable, from what I understand. But beyond that, I don't really have much perspective, because most of what I do is on the PC or on the Mac, and wireless is a beautiful thing in that case.
Well, that is true. All right, guys, one last story here from Commercial Integrator. 4 reasons to attend NSCA's Business and Leadership Conference, the BLC. And this is necessarily about I'm not going to ask you guys 4 reasons, but maybe 1 or 2 to attend the Business Leadership Conference. Our friend Dawn Mead, who sits on the board of AVNation, has been a couple times, and she says nothing but nice things about it. The networking that she's been able to do for herself and for her blogging has been phenomenal. So, Steve, is there 1 or 2 reasons that you would give to maybe go out and join the fine folks at NSCA?
Sure, there's a host of reasons. First off, for our industry, this is a great opportunity to talk about business rather than technology, and I think that's not something that we do enough of. So there's the speakers that are lined up for something like this, and we're also lined up for Infocom's AV Executive Conference this past September. We're really all business related, and we really didn't talk much about our industry. Being able to do that bridge, I think, is really the important part, but it gives everybody a lot more exposure to other industries. How do we talk to them, and really what are the challenges that we all face as business people, business owners, professionals, salespeople. Of course, the networking is powerful. I mean, that's it goes without saying. But I think that the conference helps to strengthen us as an industry, and it's a nice departure from what we're used to in going to an Infocom and really sitting and being inundated with technology. So I think it complements that, and I did not go last year. I'm really strongly considering going this year, but I went 2 years ago, and I would recommend it.
All right, George, you'll have the last word on this. A couple of reasons maybe to join the fine folks at NSCA.
Well, it's like any collection of people at these kind of conferences. You're always going to learn something. There's all really laudable and notable people speaking, and you're always going to learn something. I mean, most of them are not going to give you your standard speech. They might be peppered with some of the standard speech, but they're going to talk honestly to a number of people who are in the same industry doing the same thing. It's repeating a lot of what Steve has to say, but if you can hear what others are saying, whether it confirms what you do yourself or you had thought of doing or had never thought of, all in one speech sometimes will give you confidence to say, hey, look, we run businesses, we read about what's going on in businesses, but even in some of the trade journals, these things are not always, you can't tell if that's marketing speak or if it's honest. Right there in front of you, you can tell it's honest, and you get that honest feel of, I'm not in a silo, I am doing something that seems similar. It's sort of like what social networking does to you. It's like, yes, there are others out there who have the same kind of idea and thoughts, and this is, I know I'm going in the right place.
Yeah. And what's nice too is that you think that for a short period of time, even though you may be surrounded by your competitors, everybody has collectively similar challenges, and it's a good opportunity to talk them out and see how your neighbor deals with the same challenge that you're facing, because that I think probably 70-80% of us all face the same challenges. So I think that's another value there.
No, that's a very good point, is the fact that you're most likely, not that you're not special, but your problems are probably not as unique as you think they are, and finding someone else who has already walked the road that you're walking is very helpful, especially to hear maybe how they got out of it. So, all right, gentlemen, that's going to do it for us and for AVWeek for this week. With us has been Steve Greenblatt. Steve is the Chief Everything at Control Concepts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It was great. First time on video, and I think it went real smooth.
Yeah. How can people get a hold of you or Control Concepts?
We're at controlconcepts.net. I'm on Twitter as well as many of the other social media. Just look me up as Steve Greenblatt. And also join us on the Control Show, State of Control, where we'll be recording next week.
Yes. Next Wednesday, I believe, isn't it?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah, next Wednesday. Also with us is George Tucker, the engineering coordinator for World Stage and all things groovy at AVNation. Thank you, sir.
Good to be on again, guys. Thank you very much.
And where can people find you?
Of course, they can find me anywhere on social media as Tucker2s. I write for Tech Decisions Magazine. There's a number of them. And Commercial Integrator, as well as Red Band and our blog. Right, there's this thing called AVNation. I keep forgetting.
You do too much, by the way. Just too much. Speaking of Red Band and AVNation, holy cow. I would like to say publicly I had nothing to do with this, but it's really cool.
Yeah, we're NDA'd right now, but you guys keep a listen.
Yeah.
Keep an ear out. There's something we might do that could be really cool.
Yeah. It's really cool. All right. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's TD, Tim, David, Albright, but more importantly for me, and everybody here at AVNation. They've been working really hard on the website. Still some tweaks to do, but it's getting better. How about that? Go by the website, avnation.tv. avnation.tv. You will find this program as well as the aforementioned Control Show. I believe we have a DIY, George. Is that right? Coming up in December?
Coming up. There's a Pico Perspectives about Pico projection coming up. Probably in January there'll be a new Projection Freak. And Live Life is in reboot, and we shall be doing something very cool in the next couple of weeks.
Very cool. And we also are recording another EdTech next week, our last one for the year. So yeah, go by the website.
AV Social just
and AV Social, yes. AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been AV Week.